Hey, what's going on? Welcome to my YouTube channel, True Greatness. Today, or tonight, wanted to talk about some of the first half of the NBA season. Where do I think the Sixers fit in as we now get ready to start the second half of the season? Things that I saw in the first half that I wanted to point out, and things that I think uh, to look forward to in the second half going into the playoffs and potentially who could be in the championship and who I think will win it. First thing being, I want to start out saying when I did a video a few months ago now, probably a quarter of a way through the season, just assessing how I saw the Sixers at the time and where they fit in, and are they an elite team? Are they good, really good, championship uh, possibility or not? Or what was missing? What was working? So it's a follow up to that. And now that the All Star game has passed, All Star weekend has passed, and it's basically a little um, over halfway of the season. And the second half of the season will officially start this Thursday for the NBA. So what I saw in the first half, and this is one of the things that I said as well. I said, A, that the Sixers, were playing really good, and they showed themselves to be one of the top teams, not just in the East but in the league. Period. And I said there was three elite teams who I thought they weren't, going to get past in the playoffs if they met them in the playoffs. Boston, Milwaukee, and Denver. Two of those teams I no longer consider elite, but they're still good, are really good. No question to me, after watching the majority of the first half of the season, now that is past, and again the second half is about to start. There's only one elite team in the NBA, and that's the Boston Celtics. I think they have, yes, they had a head scratching loss against the Lakers when LeBron and AD was injured, and they had the head scratching loss at home. Though they beat that same Lakers team when LeBron and AD was playing on Christmas Day in LA. So yes, that home loss to a non-LeBron and AD game that they were playing, yeah, they didn't look good for Boston. But if you look at and the Lakers, we got to give credit. It's not like they don't have talent. It's just that outside of LeBron and AD, it hasn't been consistent. And that's why their season's been so up and down. But going back to Boston, but overall, if you look at their record, 43-12, they have shown themselves to be, in my opinion, you can legitimately say the elite team in the league. Now, Minnesota, who's the number one seed in the West, is 39-17, and has had a really good first half of the season too. But they're still relatively young, or kind of middle of the pack when it comes to. They're not really like an experienced team, but they're not fully like a young team. They're kind of like in the middle of that. Whereas like OKC, that's a young squad, and they're 36-17 or 37-16 in the West, and having a really great season. But with Minnesota, it's a lot of kind of wait and see. Can they keep this pace up for the second half of the year? And then once they get to the playoffs, as a team, are they going to step up? And they have players who in past playoff experiences, rather, on Minnesota or with another team, didn't play well in the playoffs. Had great regular seasons, but didn't necessarily play well in the playoffs. So it's a wait and see with them. That's why I wouldn't yet consider them elite. They're really good. There's no question about that. They're really good. Same thing with OKC. A really good team, but has to prove it. So I would not yet consider them to be elite. But again, a very, very good team. And the Clippers. You have to have a bunch of players that you know what you're going to get in the regular season, but in the playoffs, two things come up: performance or injuries. Have been issues with their main players. So with Harden in the playoffs has been lack of performance in big moments. With Kawhi, you've seen two things with Kawhi. You've seen when healthy, he gets two Finals MVPs, deservedly so. But you also seen lately, can you trust him to be healthy when the playoffs come? Paul George lately has been an issue of can you trust him to be healthy once the playoffs come? And then he's had some head scratching flameouts in the playoffs with the Clippers. Whereas with the Pacers, he actually, he was relatively healthy and he performed just as well in the playoffs as he did in the regular season. Though they didn't win a championship, it wasn't because of a lack of performance. But with the Clippers, he has had a history of injuries when it comes to playoff time and not performing well for the most part, except for that 1 year that they got to the Western Conference Finals. I think it was 2022, either 2021 or 2022, and he played a heck of a playoff. So with the Clippers, it's having regular season success. Though initially when they got Harden, they were like 0-6 at first, or 1-7 or something like that, and then they've had now one of the best records in the league, either number one or number two record in the league since like January, or mid-December. And Harden is working well with the Clippers, but again, we're not looking at the regular season with them. We're looking at the playoffs. So that's why I wouldn't consider them elite. Very good, but not elite. Though on paper they should be elite. But again, a good team. The Suns have finally looked like what people thought they would look like for the most part. Now that they have been relatively healthy with Bill, Durant, and Booker. Because in the beginning of the year, the three of them, one of them was injured. If it wasn't two of them, so you didn't really early on get to see what they would look like. But towards the end of the first half, those last like 2 months, you really got to see the three of them play together and what that team could look like, and they just climbed up the standings, which is now they're fifth in the West. So I think you got a lot of, like, New Orleans is a good team. Dallas, I don't know what Dallas is. At times they look good. Other times you're like, wait, what's going on? I mean, they have a good record. They're like 33-22. So they have a really good, they have a good record, and they're seventh in the West, and that tells you how deep the West is again this year. They have that type of record, and they're seventh. So they have a good record, and that's the spot they're in now. But it is a lot of inconsistency with that team, not offensively, but defensively. So I would consider them a question mark. The Kings have been up and down as well. They're eighth right now in the West. They got 31, about 31 wins, 32 wins. And they're eighth in the West. But I think, again, that consistency hasn't been there like I think a lot of people, including myself, expected. But I think they're going to make the playoffs. Now, because of the play-in, if they stay in the 8th spot or if they go to the 7th spot, yeah, they would have to play that play-in game, and then we all know what the heck can happen. Anything can happen at that moment, and then they don't make the playoffs. And right now, the Lakers and Golden State are the 9th and 10th seed. And that's been the whole thing with the Lakers. Talking about inconsistency. I mean, they got hot that last week and a half before All-Star Weekend, and now we're 30-26 in the 9th seed. And then Golden State won several games in a row before they lost, and then won going into All-Star Weekend that last like 2 weeks. And they're 27-26. So as a 10th seed. So yes, in a one-game play-in, potentially 2-game play-in, the Lakers are the Golden State could beat Dallas, could beat the Kings if those teams still remain 7-8 by the end of the season. But because of the so much inconsistency with the Lakers, so much inconsistency with Golden State, even in a play-in, I would trust the Kings over Golden State in the play-in, but I actually wouldn't trust Dallas over the Lakers in the play-in. So it's going to be interesting to see who eventually is that 7th, 8th seed. But to me, and I didn't even mention Denver. See, Denver's number 4, and outside of them going on a 4-game losing streak at the end of the first half, they've been, been really good. They're like 36-19. So they've been, I would say, maybe a little bit more expectations of kind of like where they would be seated by this point. But that also goes to show you how good the West is this year, as far as depth, from 1 to 10. Because to me, the East is good. But I would say you have 1, 2, 3, about, I would say three, I think, definite title contenders, and then a couple teams that's like on the fringes of could they be title contenders. Whereas in the West, I think you got like five title contenders, to be honest. But still, I think even in saying that in the West, what I think had been shown in that first half is that you got a lot of really good teams in the West, and very good teams in the West. But that elite team, or that team that would kind of like stand out as the elite team, I don't think that's been shown like expected. I think there's still more questions, even with those very good teams in the West. I think there's more questions than people initially thought coming into the season with some of those, expected very good teams. And some of them have lived up to being very good, but I think some, kind of the thought process was they would be elite, and they've fallen just slightly short of being elite, but are very good. And honestly, like I said, I think overall, Boston is the only elite team coming out of the league period, and coming out of the East and coming out of the league period. Like I said, I think because right now you have Boston number 1, Cleveland number 2, and Cleveland got hot. They went on like a 9-game win streak, so they're like 36-17. You have the Bucks, who talking about a team that's inconsistent, yet they're still like 35-20. But they've been very inconsistent. I mean, they've been inconsistent. I mean, you can't be very inconsistent if you're 35-20, but they've been inconsistent, and more inconsistent than people thought they would be. The Knicks, they got on a nice win streak, and then they started getting hurt. And Jalen Brunson has been playing like an MVP, and I think the Knicks at their best is the Knicks you saw during that win streak. When you had a healthy Randall, a healthy OG, Hartenstein, obviously Jalen and DiVincenzo and Josh Hart playing in their roles really well. That was like a glimpse of how you saw how good they can be. They're in the 4th right now. At that point, they basically have hovered between 3 and 5 since they got on that streak. Then the Sixers are at 5, the Pacers are at 6, the Heat are at 7, the Magic are at 8, the Bulls are the 9th team, and then the Hawks are 10. So technically, the Bulls and the Hawks are in the play-in as of right now, because the play-in is between the 7th and 10th seeds before the playoffs start. During like the last week after the last week of the regular season, then it's that weekend of the play-in games. The Bulls have played much better to get to the 9th seed than when they started. But do I really see them as a threat to, even in a In a 1-game series, if these stand and stay as they are, 7 Miami, 8 Magic, 9 Bulls, 10 Hawks. If the Bulls play the Magic in a 1-game series, or or if it happens to go with 3 games or something like that, either 1 game or 2 games series, they could potentially beat the Magic because the Magic are so young, and they're still learning how to win with consistency. So I can see them potentially being caught by the Bulls if they were to get in a play-in game or games. I do not see the Hawks in any way, shape, or form beating the Heat in a play-in game. Because if the top seed wins, then in a play-in, so between that 7 and 10, the higher seed, if the higher seed wins that first game, then the lower seed is knocked out. Who they're playing. If the lower seed happens to win, then they basically play 2 more games. So yeah, I don't see the Hawks doing much anything. They're kind of like holding a 10 spot to eventually lose in the play-in game, in my opinion. So I say all that to say, my original thought process was Boston's elite was going to be elite. Excuse me. The Bucks were going to be elite, and Denver were going to be elite. To me, initially, I thought that was going to be the 3 elite teams. The reason why I didn't put the Suns up there, because they're so top heavy, and as we saw, if one of the big 3, Durant, Bill, or Booker, though Booker and Durant have played well together in their actual record, not a big sample size, but enough sample size, they've actually won. They've had a decent record when just them 2 are playing, but obviously when all 3 are playing, they got into a groove finally, and ended up having a good record to get to 33 and 22. But that's the thing; it's the injuries, and lately Durant has had an injury history. Bill has had an injury history, so they get to the playoffs. One of those dudes are missing. They don't have a lot of depth to kind of cover that. So that's why even when the season was going on early on, that's why I was saying what I was saying, that I didn't necessarily put them as elite. Not because those 3 aren't uber talented, but they don't have that depth if one of them in a key series was to get hurt. And as we've seen in recent history, that's more than likely possible of happening. So when looking at and really looking at the first half of the year, the team that stood out to me as the only elite team is Boston. Like I said, there's other really, really good teams. I mean, Cleveland is a really, really good team. Like I said, when the Knicks have been healthy, they've shown themselves that they can be really good. But the Celtics are who stood out to this point. Now, in Denver, I don't think is elite because their starting lineup's really good. No one's questioning that. But the question would be, can their bench, because they let so many veterans go. They let Bruce Brown go. Hey, Bruce said, "Listen, I got my ring." Was a key role in them winning championship last year, coming off the bench. He got the bag after that. Got his a really nice contract this offseason. To other kind of more veteran Jeff Green key pieces that left, their bench became really dependent on their youth. And to be honest, as a whole, their bench hasn't been what people thought their bench would be to this point. Now that could change coming in to the second half of the season. They could finally kind of step into that, because you know what you're gonna get out of the starters, and Joker and Murray and Gordon, and they've been doing their thing. But what has made Denver really good to last year really taking that next step to elite, especially in the playoffs, was not only Joker doing what Joker does, and Murray really looking like he's back from the injury to his full self, was the contribution from the bench, and obviously Aaron Gordon doing his thing, in the start, and Michael Porter Jr. But the bench contribution. So not having that bench contribution, and if the starters are having a couple off nights, which doesn't happen that often, A, that puts a lot of pressure in the starting lineup, and then B, not really having that trusted bench consistently, which is why I think I would take calling them elite away now. They're still very good, but I would not call them elite. So now get into where does the Sixers fit in all this? One thing is true to this. Sixers got off to a hot start, but then what caught up with them? Injuries. Most importantly, Joel Embiid, and having to have the MCL, or essentially the knee surgery. And we still don't know when he's coming back, how ready is he going to be, all those things. I will say this, though I do think the Sixers gave up a little too much to get Buddy Hield. I get in campaign, but really that's a Buddy Hield trade. I get why they went after him, and I had no problem with the Sixers going after him. I think that was a good trade deadline move. Excuse me, because the Sixers needed more offense once Joel went down, and honestly, Tobias has been in and out of the lineup recently as well. So you needed the extra scoring punch. Now, has it fully come to fruition of what that effect could be with Buddy Hield? No, they won a couple. They won a couple games in a row. They lost the first two with Buddy, and then they won a couple, and then they lost the last game before the All-Star break. So the potential of when if Embiid comes back, and having Tobias in there consistently, and Maxey continuing to ascend as a star, not yet a superstar, but a star. The potential is there without a question with what that can look like. But I think where the Sixers fall in with all this is there's more question marks than it was early in the season. It just is. Do I still think they're a really good team when fully healthy? Yes. They are one of the best teams when fully healthy. But the Knicks getting OG and Nobi, the Pacers, and they got him before the trade deadline, and then the Pacers getting Pascal before the trade deadline. Those teams became stronger. Now, do I think the Sixers full strength in a 7-game series, which will be an entertaining 7-game series, against the Pacers, do I think the Sixers will win? Yes, I do think they will win. I'm not so sure against the Knicks anymore. In a 7-game series, Sixers are fully healthy, Knicks are fully healthy. And it was only a 1-game sample, but when that happened, and this was, early on, about a month and a half ago now, maybe 2 months ago, Knicks came into Philly and dusted the Sixers. So that would be an interesting matchup. I still think fully healthy, the Sixers can beat the Cavs in the 7-game series. And the Cavs are a good team. They're definitely a good team. But outside of Donovan Mitchell, there are other guys, like Garland and Mosley, who had their first playoff experience last year, did not fare well like they did in the regular season. Jared Allen, he actually had a couple um, playoff experience as far as with the Nets, and he actually did well last year in that playoff series. And Donovan Mitchell struggled. So as good as he is, there's still question marks when it comes to the playoffs. And I think in a 7-game series, I would take the Sixers over the Cavs, over the Pacers, because these are the teams who I think they could potentially play in a series. And I wouldn't have said this early on, even as good as the Sixers are playing, just because history said the Sixers have not consistently played well against the Bucks as far as like winning. They might have had, some good games where it went down to the wire and stuff like that. I mean, first game of the season, went down to the wire, but Sixers weren't able to pull it off against the Bucks. But looking at the Bucks, and they don't play any defense. I mean, not really. Like, it's gotten slightly better since Doc Rivers has been a coach, but I did not think that was going to be that much of an issue. Because you still got Giannis, who's in his prime. You still got Brook Lopez, who can defend enough. You still got Bobby Portis. Yes, they're not like Bobby Portis isn't like quick feet, but he's still a decent defender, and Giannis is still Giannis. So offensively, they've been what everybody expected. Because you got Dame, when Middleton has been has played and relatively not been on a minutes restriction. For the most part, he's played. He's played decent. You can still tell he's still trying to get back to his full self. So he's had games where he looks really good, and he's had other games where he didn't. But I didn't expect our defense to be so bad initially, and then essentially, like what the Pacers have done, just essentially outscored people. And again, like I said, defense got a little better lately since they made that coaching change. But even with that, they still were second. They basically hover between second and really between first and third in the East, even with talking about all this. And then Boston kind of taking that reign as the top team in the East in the league period, because Boston has the best record in the league period. But I actually would say now I could potentially see the Sixers beating the Bucks in a 7-game series simply because of the defensive deficiencies of Milwaukee. Now, could that change in the next? The regular season ends in like early April, and the playoffs are like mid-April until to the finals. Could that change? Without a question. But man, you're talking about the Bucks will really have to continue to just outscore people, even if their defense gradually gets better. But to be that championship contender clearly, in a way that once they made that Dame trade, and to see that they haven't clearly shown themselves to be on a level with Boston, because to me that they're the clear cut favorites to win the championship now. I think they have shown themselves, the Celtics, to be that. But I wouldn't trust the Bucks against a really good Denver team, or if the Suns were to stay healthy, a good Suns team. Now, do I think the Bucks are a good team? they're a heck of an offensive team. They're number 2 in points per game. But that defense just whoo, that defensive liabilities in ways that some of it wasn't initially seen makes you question how far the Bucks can go. Again, are they a good team? No doubt. But I would no longer say they're elite. So with the Sixers, to me, their now biggest threat to getting out of the East, honestly, is no doubt Boston, and I would say New York. To me, are the biggest threats now. Again, a healthy New York of getting out of the East. Now, again, I'm not knocking saying these other teams. Like I said, the Cavs are really good. The Bucks are good. The Pacers have potential, and you never can count out the Heat, especially when playoff time comes. And we know what Jimmy Butler has done in the playoffs, and Bam, and Tyler Hero. I mean, listen, Doug Robinson. So, and their young rookie from UCLA, like, yeah, he hasn't had an NBA playoffs yet, but he's played well in the regular season. And you would think Terry Rozier, because he had a knee injury right before the All-Star weekend, so if he comes back, you know what you could potentially get out of him. So you're never going to count out the Heat. So let me rephrase that. Boston definitely, the Knicks and the Heat would be the biggest threats to me for the Sixers of getting out. Now, I would say that now, of getting out of the East. Again, because of the youth and because of past kind of falling short moments in the playoffs with some of the Cavs players, including Donovan Mitchell, as great as he has been in the regular season, he's had some playoff moments where he just did not show up. So that's a question mark until that changes. And then, like I said, the rest of their squad is just young and, trying to, I'm talking about their key pieces, that is. Just don't have that playoff experience. And playoff experience doesn't always mean, winning and anything like that. And sometimes youth, are not that much playoff experience doesn't mean anything, and just players ball out and show up and surprise us. And I forgot Matt Struz has had success in the playoffs with Miami. So, but I don't fully trust them in the playoffs. Just like as on paper and as talented as the Bucks are, what they've shown on the court is that I don't trust them to get where people expected them to be, which is essentially Eastern Conference Finals or championship. And I don't know anymore if that's going to happen. So that's why I said, to me, and the Sixers are in that same boat. I mean, we know the history of Embiid, whether that's been injuries or just not showing up in the playoffs. Same thing with Tobias. Last year was really Maxi's true playoff, experience, exposure. And he did okay. So he's still, still gaining his playoff experience. So there's questions with the Sixers. Buddy Hield hasn't had a ton of playoff experience himself. So I think the Sixers, when healthy, are still really good. But if there would be roadblocks, I would say, again, those teams that I mentioned on the top of that list: Boston, the Knicks, and the Heat. No matter what position the Heat are in the playoffs, because as long as they're in the playoffs, they're a threat. There's no doubt if they're in the playoffs, there's a chance with them, as has been proven time after time since Jimmy has been there, and obviously when they had the superstar teams and all that stuff. or in the 90s when they had Tim Hardaway and Alonzo and so on and so forth. So I think when reviewing the first half of the year and what could be, if you want to say the ceiling for the Sixers, about 2 months ago, I would have said the ceiling is the Eastern Conference Finals, potentially getting to the championship. I didn't, depending on who they were going to play. Like I said, anybody outside of Denver, I honestly thought they had a good chance to win it if they got to the championship. But now I don't know if they're going to. That likelihood of them getting to the Eastern Conference Finals, I don't think is as much of a say a lock. It never was a lock, but as that confidence isn't as high with them getting to the Eastern Conference Finals as it looked a few months ago. Because again, we don't know when the B is going to come back, what he's going to look like, what is going to be like as far as in shape, all those type of things, And there were already when they were rolling, there were some questions that I felt were there as far as when it came to the playoffs. But now you're adding in dealing with a significant injury with Embiid, and when that timeline will be. You're trusting that excuse me. Well, yeah, obviously Tyrese will have one epic performance, playoff series, consistent series, to Tobias, being consistent in the playoffs, to Buddy Hield just balling all out, and then hopefully Embiid turning around. So there's a lot of ifs that I think wasn't there completely like it is now. Like I said, there are already some things to think about when they were, at their, riding high and top 3 in the East, top 4 in the NBA, when they were doing all that. But again, we're going to see what the second half looks like. Like I said, it starts Thursday. They actually play the Knicks coming out the gate. I think the game's in Philly. Yeah, I think it is in Philly. So it'll be interesting to see. And I'm not saying that one game is going to determine, oh yeah, this is going to definitely, show you where they're going to be at for either team. But I think that first 2 weeks is going to be huge into what, like how the Sixers can adjust if they can, and what that could look like, while still trying to figure out the whole Embiid situation, obviously, and that him getting healthy. So do I still think the Sixers have a shot? If you get a healthy Embiid, a consistent Tobias in the playoffs, yes, to get to the Eastern Conference Finals. I just don't see anybody beating the Celtics. I think they're coming out of the East, and like I said, I think they're going to win a chip. But we also have seen moments in the playoffs where Jason Tatum and Jaylen Brown have just disappeared, and it's like, wait, just didn't step up. So there's no guarantee that Boston's going to get out the East, or get to the Eastern Conference Finals. But if you look at the first half of the year and how all the teams have played, or even just in general, who has been relatively healthy, and what you've seen when they've been relatively healthy, the team that has stood out, has been Boston. And as good as Minnesota has been, because they've been really good too, but they haven't yet, you know, made a deep playoff run. So there's questions um, of yeah, they might have this regular season success, but is that going to, are they going to be able to make that deep run in the playoffs? So that's why, again, Boston, you've seen them have deep runs with the under the with the Brown and Tatum era. Um, so there's more trust there, and then just obviously having Porzingis and adding Drew Holiday has proven, and Derek White had a All-Star caliber first half as well. He wasn't voted in, but in the final either starter or bench role. But a roster, excuse me, an All-Star roster. But he had a case. So they've done what they has supposed to, which is look elite. But yeah, I think, like I said, OKC has exceeded. I think, including myself, people. I think when you listen to like sports talk and stuff like that, you saw potential OKC last year in SGA really taking the next step, and Chat coming, to coming off his, last year where he was injured and he couldn't play, and this year, being his rookie year, and you saw in college what he could be. So there was all this kind of like, ooh, this team could do something. But it still was like, how fast would they rise up? Would they be in that 8 to 6 spot, or 6 to 8 spot and hovering around there, or would they be on the top, level between that 1 and 4 seed of the West? And I think in some ways they somewhat exceeded a little bit more than what people expected. So again, a good team, very, very good team, but an experience as a whole when it comes to the playoffs. So it's going to be a fun second half of the year. Like I said, I talked about just in general in the NBA and where I think the Sixers fall and what they could do, the questions, potential. But we're going to see. We're going to see what this is going to look like. So thank you. As always, check out my other videos. Again, this is on my YouTube channel, True Greatness.